Hi there, everyone. It's meteorologist Justin Stapleton, 11:35, right before the 12 o'clock show. Wanted to hop on KPRC 2 Plus here, so thanks for joining me. If you happen to see notification on your phone and you popped on for us, let's talk about some storms. We expected this to happen today, that we were going to be pretty stormy for a good chunk of the afternoon, and boy, oh boy, they have not disappointed. Let's get you out and show you what's happening. A couple of different things. Let's start with an aerial flood advisory that just popped up a few minutes ago. Right up here underneath all this lightning. You can see it right there in between Panorama Village, Conroe, and then just north of the Woodlands, right? So this is an area that actually got hit with some pretty heavy storms this morning. And in fact, that aerial flood advisory is because of the saturated ground. So, and I thought we might see this today, honestly, when we were talking about it throughout the morning newscast, is that if we were going to get anything today, we might be looking at areas that get hit by one round in the morning, they get hit by another round in the afternoon, and then that's going to cause some issues. So that goes until 2:30, and you can see that's right just outside of Willis. Now, even areas that aren't in that aerial flood advisory are dealing with some pretty heavy rain here. All of Lake Conroe. This is not a good Friday to be out on the lake, I can tell you that, because we're looking from, north tip of the lake all the way down to the south tip. There is just pounding, covered in lightning. And in fact, look at our lightning counter. We're talking about 140 strikes. And it's not just there. If we widen this out, look at that number just keep going up, right? So we're talking close to 700-800 strikes in many of these locations. Now, we also have just seen a pretty gnarly downpour start right across parts of downtown. In fact, big cluster as you get in and across parts of the Heights, lower end of the Heights. So that's over towards, Shepherd, Yale Boulevard, Heights Boulevard, all of this across the I-10 corridor as you go up into the Heights, up towards, like, let's say 19th Street, for example, and then we're getting pounded across downtown. So anywhere from there over towards Memorial, that's all of Washington Avenue. So just to the east of Memorial Park. If you're at Memorial Park, or if you live out that way, for example, look back off to the east and you're probably seeing, just black skies. I would not be shocked if you're seeing that. And then, of course, you can see some of the lightning strikes that we're picking up. Same thing as you get over towards East River, East End here, moving on down into the Edo areas from Milby to Polk Street. So just big, heavy downpours that are bringing in a whole lot of rain. In fact, as we're doing this, let me widen this out just a little bit. Let's turn on our skits. This is an indicator of any kind of severe weather elements that might be within the storm itself. So let's see what we've got. If we hit on this number here, that'll give us all kinds of stuff. So let me move all this out of the way. This will just give you a sense of what we're seeing, of when to might expect some of these. And this is if they were moving. The thing is, none of these have really moved real fast. And you notice that the movement right now is west-southwest around 17 miles an hour. We do have a chance to see some hail, and that looks like it's about pea-size hail, if anything is trying to make it to the ground. But some of these locations in particular, you got Sam Houston Park, Lamar High School, the zoo potentially could see this within the next 10 minutes if it pushes down there, and then possibly in towards the Med Center and NRG just a few minutes after that. So let me turn this off so you can get a sense of what we're seeing with the storm itself. And the storm is about the only thing that we have in the metro. It's a good one, downpour that's popping. But other than that, most of the rest of the metro is just looking at some black skies. In fact, let me show you what it looks like. I would say, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to jump over here real quick. Let me get out of the way. This is a camera from the West Loop looking into downtown, and that is pretty black. In fact, downtown is blacked out right now because of the downpours. You see, let me get over here. There's the edge of where that rain shaft is. You see the lightning behind me, right? So I'll give you a good indication of what it looks like as this is really starting to come down with some ferocity. So do make sure that you've got the Storm Tracker 2 app, or excuse me, the KPRC 2 weather app on your phone and have it downloaded. If you don't, if you're watching us here and you haven't turned the notifications on, go into the drop-down menu, turn on those notifications. You can do it in your settings too, and it'll let you know, like if the lightning is within 5 miles of you. For a lot of folks, that's going to be really important. Okay, a couple of other areas that we're paying attention to out towards parts of Fort Bend County. This is right outside of East Bernard towards Kendleton, from Rosenberg down to Pleaks, Fairchild, Needville. In fact, this is the boundary that Caroline and I were watching this for about the last 45 minutes. It's starting to weaken just a bit, but this may be one that as this starts to fade, it will create more thunderstorms just south of there. So Wharton down to parts of El Campo, maybe just north of there. Eagle Lake, for example, could be some spots that we're starting to pick up on some trouble. And then, of course, I've got a little cluster right here. Looks like it's right outside of Richwood and Lake Jackson. This one also is starting to blossom up just a bit. So this is up near Bastrop Beach. There's Van Pelt, all of these areas down here in Brazoria County. This is the 288 corridor. If you're not familiar with kind of where we are on the map, that's what we're looking at. So clusters there, certainly some trouble. And if we widen this out, notice that we're finally getting a bit of a breakdown in Galveston. It has just been a gnarly morning for most of Galveston. A lot of heavy rain. Most of that thunderstorm activity moved east, and now it's moving over across parts of Lake Charles. Lake Charles, this is going to be really rough sledding over there on I-10 if you're traveling that way over the next 1 to 2 hours, and we're seeing some things start to pop up on the north side too. So let's head up there. So right outside of Corrigan, there's Groveton. As you get down to Onalaska, see some cells that are starting to pop over parts of Lake Livingston down to Cold Spring. And then, of course, as you cut over to the west, we've got some pretty good downpours there in parts of Walker County. So from Huntsville, shooting south down towards New Waverly. So right outside of New Waverly. And then, of course, as you push your way over towards the north end of Lake Conroe, still looking at some pretty heavy downpours. So all of this is going to continue to bubble up over the next 1 to 2 hours as it continues to move through. And this is all part of a boundary that's stuck right on top of us. So let me put this in motion because I want to show you that, as this will give you a good indication of what we're seeing in terms of the not much movement to these storms, right? And that's part of the issue. Let me go with that boundary because I want to talk about that a little more. So as you see this boundary start to fall apart, you see these new storms right here just to the west of Katy up near Patterson that are starting to develop. So that's what happens. These collapse, they kick off new storms. This starts to collapse. Watch all those start to bubble up, right? So that's all the outflows from the storms that are pushing south into parts of Wharton County, and that's what really gets things fired up. Same thing as that little cluster there that we were looking at between Lake Jackson and over to Angleton. They're starting to pop. Looks like we've got a new one here over near Clear Lake. Let's jump in on this. This one right near the side of the radar too. That's why it just kind of falls apart. You see how it gets close to it and then you just can't see it? That's because this is the dome of the radar, and so it can't see right on top of the radar. But it's a good indication. You've got a couple of lightning strikes with that just south of Clear Lake. That's starting to press its way in. There's Eagle Point as that pushes in right across Highway 3 there. So all of this is going to be some spots that we'll watch over the next 2 to 3 hours. And it does look like things are going to get pretty busy. But if you're just joining us, what do we got? 11:42, it's meteorologist Justin Stapleton. Thanks for joining me here on KPRC 2 Plus for a weather update. We're going to get to the news here coming up in about 15 minutes. We'll have meteorologist Caroline Brown take you through the lunchtime hour. But I wanted to just jump on since things are starting to get a little active out there and get you a quick update on what we're seeing. So do have a couple of heavier downpours on the north side. You can see everything just kind of bubbling up here. So all of the North Freeway from parts of Walker County right outside of Huntsville towards New Waverly. You can see from New Waverly over to Willis towards Panorama Village. And these are areas that got hit pretty hard this morning with the first wave of rain right about 6:30 for about an hour. So we didn't get a lot of recovery time, and that's why we're getting things like this aerial flood advisory that you see goes until 2:30 on Friday. Let me put a stop on that so you can see the results of that. So that aerial flood advisory, that does include areas around Panorama Village. So as you go just south of there, pressing your way down in towards what we got, Alden Bridge. So it does include sections of Conroe, though I think the bulk of that is just to the west of Conroe. And these neighborhoods just south of there as you go towards Sterling Ridge, Indian Springs, these areas here are the ones that we have to watch carefully, as it could likely be some pretty stormy conditions. In fact, let's see if they have anything. Yeah, we've got a couple there. So this storm in particular, what do we look like? We're heading towards Del Mar Stadium, Kincaid High School, Memorial High School, about the next 10, 15 minutes. We'll see if it holds together if we can get to that point. But you get the idea. You look into the center of this here, and you know that's got a potential for it. Look at some of these cloud tops. We're talking almost 30,000 feet, right? So these are some hefty storms as they're moving in across. That'll put it towards Magnolia High School around 12:15 as we head into the next 20, 30 minutes. And then south end of that storm, it says the direction is headed north. This is what happens sometimes with the computer model, is if they just pulse, they're kind of just bubbling up and not going anywhere. It picks a direction where it thinks the storms are going. But my guess is that if you're in Tomball, you're going to get socked by this for the next 10, 15 minutes. If you're outside of this, it's probably not going to move up towards Magnolia High School. The western end of this may switch over, but just keep in mind that they are out there. And they will be there at least for the next 10, 15 minutes as they're starting to press on through. Okay, just west of there, or excuse me, just east of there, we've got another cluster here. This is north of the airport. Bush Airport got a real good soaker this morning. Hobby did too, right before 6 o'clock. I think it was about 5:45, and we were looking at a pretty good downpour This one here is located near Porter Heights. So if we put a marker on this towards Porter Heights, that could put it towards Spring, Splashtown, for example, which this time of year is starting to wrap up for the summer, but still active. That could be till about 12-14. That one also at about 23,000 feet and not much in the way of any kind of hail. I don't think we're seeing any hail within that. The only one that looked like right now that may potentially be dropping some hail, we could see a little bit of pea-sized hail with this cluster that's trying to get into downtown. In fact, let's go right back to it. Now, this is a great question. I get this all the time from folks when they see this and they say, hey, why does it look like there's no rain into downtown? Well, the reason for that is because of the skyscraper height, right? The buildings are so tall, when the radar swings through it, it gets blocked by the downtown skyscrapers. And so that's why it looks like there's no rain. I assure you that if you're down around Travis Street right now over towards the JP Morgan building, it is pouring, right? And there's a lot of lightning around. In fact, you see all of these spots, Quitman Avenue over towards, there's Heights Boulevard, there's Washington Ave, there's Memorial Parkway as it goes out towards the park. And if we look in the center of this one in particular, let me widen this out. If it can continue pushing west at about 10, 15 miles an hour, they're not moving fast. That may put it over towards Memorial Park here I'd put it within like the next 7 minutes. So if you were just getting out, you're like, hey, I'm going to try to get out and maybe get a run in like this guy was going to try to do, that may be a little difficult over the next 1 to 2 hours. So if we put this in motion in the last hour, notice that they just bubble. See, and there's really not movement. They just kind of flare up. And as they flare up, then they're just raining out whatever they've got. Now, one of the reasons why we always say it's super important, even if you're not in the center of a thunderstorm, to just be mindful and be careful. Well, look what happens. Let me put a stop to this. Look where some of these lightning strikes are. You see, well, hang on a second. Let's go back up here. This lightning strike in particular, there's one just outside of Memorial Park, right? The center of the storm is well east of there, right? It's over across parts of Heights Boulevard, but you see this lightning strike over there towards San Felipe, right? Now, again, these are strikes that are probably bouncing in between the clouds. I don't see any positive strikes, except looks like we've got one right there. The yellow ones are what are called the positive strikes. Those are the big lightning chambers that can make it all the way down to the ground or a tree or the top of a building or something. And those are the ones, when you see that, you're going to hear a kapow after that, because it's the physics of it, violently forcing the air, collapses back in. That's what makes the thunder. But you get the idea. There are a few of those out there. Those are the ones that can be deadly. So anyway, in these downpours, these are not ones that are fun to try to drive around in. So unfortunately, this time of day, as there's a lot of folks trying to get out either for lunch meetings, picking up the kids from school, especially the half-dayers, right, the pre-Ks and the kindergartens. Man, that's not going to be a lot of fun out there. So just keep in mind that this is what we're running into. So that's one of the trouble spots. And then, of course, if you're just joining us, we've been watching these thunderstorms off to the north here. I got another one. Looks like it's starting to ramp up just a bit. That's just north of the airport. So that's right outside of Porter Heights. That one also looks like it's going to be slicing westward. Nice big cluster here just to the east of there. So that's the Grand Parkway, right? So there's 99. There's Northridge Forest Drive. And you can see this is, what are we looking at? That's Imperial Promenade, I think, right around that neighborhood. So all of this neighborhood just to the north of 99 up near Porter Heights is getting hammered right now with some heavy downpours. In fact, that's probably blinding rain. When it starts getting in that purple and black, that's an indication that we've got some serious rain starting to fall. If we look inside of this storm, yeah, that one's about 23,000 feet. So these are pretty big cumulus clouds that are building up there. And that's just one of about 5 or 6 big downpours we're seeing. See a few more over towards Roman Forest. And this green box, if you're not familiar with that is what's called an aerial flood advisory. And that's because of the heavy rain that they saw this morning across parts of Montgomery County, right in this box. And then they now picked up probably another ½ inch to an inch of rain. So far, so good. We don't have any flash flood warnings, but I wouldn't be shocked if this is not the last aerial flood advisory we see for today, especially some of these areas. We may even get one very quickly up here between New Waverly and Willis, possibly up to Huntsville, because we did see some pretty good rain early this morning and some downpours. Now, they're not everywhere, obviously, but the areas that are getting hit pretty good. And it looks like we're starting to pick up some intensity with this cluster here right towards Wharton and El Campo. So anywhere just north of Bay City, you can see that right on the Southwest Freeway. So this cluster, as you move your way on down the Brazos River, looking at a potential for some pretty heavy downpours. Starting to pick up a little bit of lightning here across parts of Fort Bend County. So that's just north of Kendleton. So between East Bernard As you pick it up, there's Beasley and then Kendleton. So this neighborhood just north of there starting to pick up some pretty heavy downpours and some pretty heavy rain. Right outside of Eagle Lake to Columbus, I've got a couple other downpours. And then, of course, as you know, if you're in and around the loop here and you're trying to get downtown and you say, well, what am I looking at? What does it look like? We got a nasty one here, right? Look at that, right in between the Heights on over towards Memorial. And we'll see, this is moving west-southwest around 17 miles an hour. So let me show you what it looks like here. Let me step out of the way. Yeah, that's pretty heavy. At least I could see some of the buildings in the downtown, which is certainly better than what we were seeing just about 2-3 minutes ago. And picking up with some pretty good intensity. We're at 77 right. I'll tell you what, I think I've definitely blown the forecast for today, Caroline. I don't think I'm anywhere close to that 92 we were putting up.
First high in the 80s?
Yeah, this could be it, right? We were talking about what's the first high in the 80s. This might be it, but you get the idea. You see how active things are through the rest of the afternoon to about 2, 3, 4 o'clock. So I think we're not done with the rain, and that is why we will probably see more aerial flood advisories when it's all said and done by this afternoon. Figured that today was going to be a very busy day with that boundary sitting right across the area. That was part of the cold front that moved south. It's stalled out. Now it's just sort of a weakness in the atmosphere. And so it's just allowing things to really crank up here. So there's the Woodlands over towards downtown. And you see back off to the parts of Liberty County, also looking at some downpours. But and here's the thing. If this starts to pop now, that's actually better for our evening because this could probably blow through most of the atmosphere, use all the Topo Chico juice up. And then by 7, 8 o'clock, we may be winding down. So it looks like if that's the case, our evening plans may be better than what we'd initially thought we would see when we could see storms ranging all the way till 9, 10, 11 o'clock, right? So if that's the case, that's certainly better than what we were looking at, but that's not anything you want to drive into if you see it's black like that into downtown, and it's really been active. So I'm going to go wide with this shot, and I want to show you what's happening. So we have a boundary sitting right here. Let's turn this in motion because that'll actually help.
We've got 3 minutes left. You should probably switch out the mic.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. I appreciate that. Okay. So if we put this in motion, notice that you have things bubbling up. We have a lot of lightning right across the I-10 corridor, and that's from a boundary that pushed south, stalled right on top of us. And so as long as that's in play, we're going to keep things pretty messy here across most of the area, right? So once again, let's go one final look here. As we said, Caroline's going to take over here at 12 o'clock. She, Lisa, and Andy will join you for KPRC News at noon. So biggest areas we're looking at right now, we've got a pretty good cluster of downpour right across downtown. Look, that's starting to weaken just a bit, but I would be willing to bet that's dropped a decent amount of rain in a very small period of time. It looks like we've got a new aerial flood advisory that just popped up. This one now towards the Woodlands. That's, let's see, how does that go until? That's until 3 o'clock. So we've got 1 till 2:30 between New Wave or Panorama Village and just south of there. That's till 2:30. And then the second one right here till 3 o'clock. So both of these are going to be pretty active. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see a few more, maybe back off to the west towards Porter Heights. Looks like that thunderstorm starting to collapse just a bit. And I still think we'll probably see an aerial flood advisory north of there between New Waverly and Huntsville, possibly Panorama Village and Willis over towards Montgomery. So Montgomery County really getting hammered pretty good right now with those downpours. So this is going to be what we're looking at over the next 1 to 2 hours. So the bottom line is, if you happen to hear one of those kapows, you see some of those black clouds, or even better, you get a notification on the KPRC2 weather app that says, hey, there's lightning within 5 miles. If you were trying to go outside, get a run in, something you're going to do, take the kids to the park, may not be the best time for that. Certainly make sure that you check the weather before you go. We'll keep you abreast of what's happening out here for the rest of the day, but we do expect it to be a fairly active Friday for us, and that could stretch all the way from College Station down towards Lake Jackson. Hopefully the coast gets a bit of a break, but we'll watch for more of these downpours that work their way in across parts of downtown. I'm meteorologist Justin Stapleton. Thanks for joining me for this weather update. As I mentioned, meteorologist Caroline Brown will be by coming up here in just about 5 minutes for the start of KPRC2 News at noon. Stay safe out in those storms. We'll keep you updated throughout the day.